Professor Haystacks here with the review of the episode Newbie Dash. I'm not actually going to review the whole thing because that tends to result in videos that are longer than the episode itself. Instead, I'm going to focus on a few key aspects. Now, first up is a random point of geography I want to note. We'll have two short clips that I'm going to run back to back here. Let's watch those for a moment.
Pinky, I'm not leaving Ponyville. I just have to train for this show.
Okay, so what we see there is that apparently Rainbow Dash is performing with them but not touring with them or something, but she also is going to this training mesa and apparently can go back and forth between there in a relatively short period of time. From what we've seen before, it seems like train journeys to everywhere in Equestria proper don't take more than maybe 24 hours. One overnight at most, and that's to far-flung places like Appaloosa. For a skilled flyer, wouldn't be more than maybe 2 days flight. They can't actually fly 24 hours a day, but they can probably go faster than trains, at least if they're the Wonderbolts. This just says that equestrian geography is relatively compact. Presumably the mesa is centrally located, which would actually put it in the mountains around Canterlot. All right, next we have a montage of clips. I'm not going to add music to it or anything. I'm just going to keep the sound that's on there. But let's take a look and see if we can figure out what I am trying to tell you with this.
Looking good. Okay, you're about to take your first flight as an actual Wonderbolt. No pressure. Luck. Save that for the rest of the team. Of course you're supposed to be a Wonderbolt. We've been waiting for a spot to open up ever since you joined the reserves.
Flip, my first day, I misjudged my landing and came down right on Spitfire's hoof. Hoof and mouth.
Duh! Because I'm a Wonderbolt!
Okay, so assuming that went well, we have a montage of all but one clip that I want to show at the end and a key point. We have, in the first clip, we see that Rainbow Dash spreads her wings to strike a pose, as well as using them to gesture. Then we see her using them to put on goggles, although she removes them with her hooves. These both indicate the using of wings more or less like hands, much as unicorns do. Once again, Earth ponies kind of take it in the shorts. Super strength, but an inability to use fine motor control to manipulate objects. We see during the sequence, of which I only showed a bit here, where we see that Rainbow Dash is best main 6. She uses her wings to quick style her mane, roughly like Rarity's, to be Rainbow Fash, which you could too easily make that fascist. We also see gesturing with wings, and later, a different flyer, the captain of the Wonderbolts, Spitfire, using her wings to poke at Rainbow Dash's chest. I don't know what you actually call that on a horse. As well as to hand over goggles. We also see a different Pegasus using wings as if it were raising their hand. So we see Pegasi routinely using wings as if they were hands, and they seem fairly dexterous in that point. Now, there is one more clip on that I feel is the most significant, and I will show it right now.
I don't want to be stiff when I show up at Wonderbolt headquarters.
All right, did you catch that? When Rainbow Dash was talking about applying balm, she waved her wingtips, much like this, in a way that is typically done with fingers. And we also note that it appears to be her feathers moving. That doesn't actually make sense, so I'm assuming it's a pinion that just happens to look feather-like, which it can occur. So the wings and pinions of Pegasi seem to have a high level of fine motor control. Admittedly, the Wonderbolts are probably better than most. Scootaloo, for instance, doesn't do this, nor does Bulk Biceps, but they have tiny wings. The wiggling of the pinions that Rainbow Dash does there is equivalent more or less to the fine motor control of hands. This implies that the wings could conceivably be used to, say, paint or something, manipulate a paintbrush or manipulate a pencil to write in a way that earth ponies wouldn't be able to do and unicorns would have to do with magic. Might be difficult, might be a bit like seeing a monkey trying to write. They don't actually have opposable thumbs, so they can't grip pencils well, for instance. But I find it most interesting. We haven't seen this use much, possibly because we rarely see episodes where nearly all the characters are pegasi, and it would be a bit awkward if one of them has surrogate hands and the others don't. 2 brief points I want to note that I'm not going to show the clips for. The first is the Wonderbolts motto, which is something like Osteos Volantus. They may have pronounced it slightly differently. They say something like soaring high. I'm going to look up these Latin words after I'm actually recording this. So what you're going to see here in just a minute is me standing still and then my voice recorded at a later date dubbed over it. And that will start now. I think the Wonderbolts motto is Altius Volandus. Their pronunciation is more ecclesiastical than the Latin I learned, but Volandus is W-O-L, either O or A, I'm not actually sure, N-D-U-S. In this case, volo volare is the verb to fly. Volandus is the gerundive, which means it is a passive participle denoting necessity. Altius is the comparative higher. So they translate fly as soaring. So in a Latin phrase, if the verb is unspecified, it's assumed to be a to be verb like is, was, are. And the subject can also be implied. So in this case, it would be you, I, he, she needs to be flying higher would be our translation. The gerundive that's acting as the noun here is in the masculine, but when referring to horses, equus, which is in the masculine, can refer to horses of either gender, unless you are specifically talking about a mare, in which case it's equa. Since Wonderbolts can be of either gender, we can assume they would put their motto in the masculine. Thus, the most likely translation would be something like, he or she needs to be flying higher, or possibly, I need to be flying higher, if you're referring to yourself when you say it. And that is my Latin 2 cents on this.
Screwed with
Back
my
to the
future
rest
self
of the video.
to some extent. Let's move on to the next point, and that is a more sciencey point in what Reading Rainbow says. Reading Rainbow. I'm not going to sing the rest of that because it's copyrighted. I assume that is why they didn't just call her Reading Rainbow.
You know, I was just reading about how
She
dihedral wing
mentions
angles
the
can help
use of
increase stability
dihedral
in
wing
banking
angles
turns.
in order to increase stability and banking turns. I was unfamiliar with this. I know some aerodynamics, but aero engineering is not exactly my specialty. Okay, so after some research, the dihedral angle is the angle upward from horizontal of wings on commercial aircraft. If the wing would be straight out like this, then it's up like this, and that is the dihedral angle, is the angle that it makes with the horizontal. I'm going to use the mic to gesture. So you can kind of see that angle. If it gestures down instead, if the wing angle is down instead, it's called anhedral or negative dihedral or antidihedral. There's reasons for that one, but I'll get to that in a moment. On fixed-wing aircraft, which commercial aircraft generally are, the dihedral angle causes a stabilization effect. So, stand off to the side here. If the wind were coming at it and you were banking and the wings are straight out,
then as the wind hits the wings at an angle, if you're flying at an angle to the wind, because you have to actually fly at an angle to the wind to go a direction other than directly with or against the wind, then with straight wings, the angles are the same. You'll tend to get a bit of wobble on this axis that's essentially random. It's not random, but that's going in. But if the wings are upswept slightly, the angle, it's going to hit these wings at a different angle, these ones that are tilted up, and it will actually have a tendency to induce a rotation because you'll have a stronger wind on this side, rotating it back to the horizontal. And this is called the dihedral effect, and it creates stability along the roll axis of your airplane. And it especially does that if you are flying at an angle, which is most common when you are making turns, but also if you get split off to an angle due to turbulence or something, it helps to right the aircraft. Now there's things other than wing angle that affect that. Not going to go into it. But on a banking turn, this means you're necessarily at an angle, and this will provide riding stability. Now there's an interesting wrinkle in that if we have a negative dihedral angle, an anhedral angle to the wings, it reduces the stability, as now the tendency is not to right the wings but to unright them when flying at an angle like that. But this does allow you to make a quick banking turn. So normally you'd have to bank relatively slowly as you tilt the wings to do so. With an anhedral angle, it actually pushes you more into the bank and you can turn very tightly. This has a high G-force. It's used in fighters. You can't use it on commercial aircraft because you'd make all your passengers sick, and if they weren't wearing their safety belts, slam them into walls. But it is highly useful in fighter aircraft, and you'll note that many fighter aircraft actually have angles like that. If I've done my job right here, you will have seen a regular aircraft over here earlier, and right now you should be seeing a stock photo of a fighter plane showing the wings swept down. But this all assumes that the angles are fixed. So if they were fixed wing, then Rainbow Dasher's suggestion would technically be safer, but would also make it harder to make the flashy tight turns that an air show force like the Wonderbolts, or say the Blue Angels in real life, are known for. Now, the Blue Angels, of course, are fixed-wing aircraft, so there's not much they can do. But a Pegasus could take an anhedral angle to make a quick bank, and then once they're turning into the direction they want, sweep the wings up into a dihedral angle for stability, righting themselves again. Presumably their wing response time is relatively quickly, so by doing this, they would be able to both turn and stabilize with a relative minimum amount of effort. This would improve their endurance for long routines. So the suggestion makes sense if you read between the lines a bit. Again, stability in a flashy routine is not your primary concern, but since these are not airplanes, these are creatures using their own magical and muscle power to fly, they need to conserve their energy. So altering their wing angle in this manner would enable them to get through a long routine with less exhaustion. Now, I believe that covers all I wanted to cover from this episode. There are many points. Oh, one minor point. I noticed that Firestreak is said to have retired in this episode. I don't think we've ever actually seen that pony to teach full time. I think Firestreak was referred to with a masculine pronoun. Anyway, even if they don't, I'm going to assume if it ever comes up that Firestreak is a professor, so it would be then Professor Firestreak. I'm going to assume it's going forward if it comes up that he's Professor Firestreak because we need more academics in Equestria. I don't know that anyone has ever been referred to as professor in the series before. Maybe we can just use sensei. Anyway, that is all for now. With luck, after cuts, this will come in around 15 minutes. Until next time, good night and drive safely. My little pony,
What will today's adventure be? My little pony, my little pony. Draw something, yeah. Da 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 da. Don't know what they're saying here. My little pony, my little pony. I'll be there right by your side. I'll be there right by your side.